saying to Kat at County Hall to the borough. At the borough, they're doing staff in rotation. So some of the staff, you know, key staff is in, but then like planning and whatever, they are working in for a week and then at home for a week. So you've always have got people in there, just, you know, spaced a lot more.
So I'm just trying to get Divya to join.
Hang on. We're just trying to get Debbie. Just a minute.
Okay. Hi everyone.
Hello, Debbie. Good morning.
Hiya. You all right?
Yes, we're all fine, thank you.
Okay, we're live.
We're good now?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, it's 10 o'clock. We've got a full complement now. So off we go. I have to read the script out because, as you know, it's all recorded. So good morning. Welcome everybody to the local pension board, Monday 10th of August. Now this is a Microsoft Teams meeting and our supporting officer is Kat Tuoni. This meeting is being broadcast live via the County Council's YouTube channel and will also be available for viewing after the meeting. Due to the current situation, all members of the board and officers presenting today are joining online. Firstly, can I ask that all officers and members mute their microphone until they're invited to speak? And if you're able to use your video camera, please turn it on and off during the duration of the meetings. If members or officers wish to speak, please ensure you use your raise your hand function and not the chat facility. As you probably know, the chat facility is also FOI-able. So anyway, before we move on to the main meeting agenda, you may have seen that the Scheme Advisory Board are aware that some funds have not been having their local pension board meetings due to COVID. Members can be assured that the Leicestershire Fund has continued to keep the board informed. And whilst the last meeting, which took place on the 3rd of February, the pension manager provided an interim summary to all members on the 3rd of June. Officers and I feel by scheduling 4 board meetings a year, most of them only have 2, County Council has 4 board meetings a year. This provides a sufficient resilience should there be a reason for a meeting to be cancelled when exceptional circumstances occur, such as in this case, COVID. Now to the minutes of the meeting held on February the 3rd, which are on pages 3 to 8 on your agenda. I propose that the minutes of this meeting are taken as agreed, confirmed and signed. Does everybody agree? I see nodding, so if anybody doesn't agree, or if anybody has got a comment on the minutes from page 3 to 8, please raise your hand. No hands have been raised. I move on to item 2 on our agenda, which is question time. I have received no questions from members of the public. Therefore, I move on to item 3, to advise of any other items which the chairman has decided as urgent. And there were no urgent matters. Item 4 are declaration of interest in respects of item on the agenda. If members have any declarations to be made, please raise your hand now. No hands have been raised, and I move on to item 5. Item 5 is a pension fund administration report. from April to June 2020. It's on pages 9 to 24 on your agenda. And it is Ian Howe to present this report to you. I switch my microphone off and it is over to you, Ian. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. Nice to see so many faces. It's been a long time, hasn't it? So it's good to see everybody. Thank you for that, Chair. This is the quarterly admin report, April to June 2020. There are quite a few areas in here, so I was going to just kind of cover the key points, and then obviously if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. So to start with, this obviously covers the period where we've been working from home. So you'll see that the KPIs for the period April to June were very good. They were really good considering this covers the home working and the sort of move to home working, which was at the end of March, beginning of April. I won't go through all the figures other than to say some areas are higher than we would ideally like. Aggregations is the key one for me. Aggregations really has increased significantly. That always increases during the period of year end, which this period covers. So this will be a priority once we've finished year end, which we should do by the end of August, very early September. And the other point to add on the figures, we've started to record two new areas, transfers out and refunds, because we do expect off the back of COVID, potentially more people considering transferring out due to things like furlough arrangements, or where maybe members of the family have lost their jobs, unfortunately. So people are trying to increase their income, and they're looking at different ways of doing that. And people are looking at transferring out to try and get benefits from elsewhere. So that's one area that the pensions regulator has asked funds to give greater scrutiny towards. And refunds is the other, where people can opt out within 2 years and take a refund. Currently in our fund, we haven't really experienced any increases in those areas, but we will continue to monitor them. The other areas I will just quickly touch on. Year end. I'm really pleased with year end. It's gone remarkably well. It was slow in starting because a lot of the employers were shut because of COVID, so we couldn't get any information out of them. But we've worked really hard in the section, as have the employers, on year end, and we've had all the information in. There's only one employer, which is Vines Academy, which is having a little bit of trouble getting some of their queries resolved, but they're working through them, and I don't anticipate even they will actually fail to meet the deadline. I think they will do it. It's going to be tight, but I think it's going to happen. So I'm really pleased to say that the statutory deadline of the 31st of August for annual benefit statements, I'm sure we will achieve that. There's no reason why we won't now. And the pension taxation statements, which are due out by the 6th of October, equally, we've already started the pre-work on those, and they will start to run as soon as the annual benefit statements are completed. So I'm really pleased with how year end's gone, and that's credit to all the colleagues in the section and indeed the employers that we've worked really closely with. The next area I just wanted to touch on is Mcleod, Sargent and the cost cap. This has moved on quite significantly since the last meeting. This is the remedy following the judgments brought about by Mcleod and Sargent against the age discrimination from the move to career average schemes in public sector. And the remedy has now gone out for consultation. The consultation runs through to the 8th of October. I have started to draft the reply from the Leicestershire Fund, which I will share with you at the next meeting, if not indeed before. The key to this is the likelihood is we will need to get all the missing hours. So every member's hours changes from the period 2014 to 31st of March 22, upload those into the pensions admin system, and then effectively, whichever the benefit is higher, effectively the final salary with those hours included, or the career average, whichever is higher, is the benefits that then the member will be paid. So it's effectively giving to ensure that the members are not worse off since the age discrimination change. So that's a major piece of work that the section will be undertaking. It's informed the employers, and we will be able to provide the template, the national template, to the employers probably in the next 2 weeks to start requesting those hours. So that's going to be a significant piece of work for both employers and the pension fund. And I don't take that lightly, because that is a big piece of work that's going to affect all public sector schemes. The next area is the 95,000 exit cap. Government have actually published their reply to the consultation, which was back in April 2019. In simple terms, what this is really trying to do is to stop people walking away with more than £95,000. So it's broadly trying to sort of reduce the cap or reduce the amount of money that people can walk away with. So say, for example, they're made redundant, and there's a redundancy payment and a pension strain. If those two elements add up to more than 95,000, then effectively something has got to change within the LGPS regulations to allow that unreduced benefit to be reduced for the excess element over 95. So the consultation reply does state that pension strain will be included. Because that's going to be included, the regulations will need to change to take account of that. How that's going to happen, there is no yet clarity, but I'll watch this space. But it does mean it's moving now. So they're probably the two key areas, Mcleod and the 95,000 exit cap, which have moved on significantly in the last quarter. The other areas are governance items, which are in all the reports. So there's the complaints. We've had no new IDRP stage 2s in the quarter, which is good. The implementation of monthly postings has moved on quite well, but year end always takes over at this quarter. But things are progressing well with year end and iConnect and monthly postings, so that's progressing well. The next one is about COVID-19 and the update in terms of how it's impacted on pensions. I've tried to include a kind of a summary there, points 28 down to point 38. I don't sort of propose going through them all, because I'm sure you'll have had a chance to look at those, but that basically shows there are a number of areas that pensions have been impacted on by COVID, but they're all in hand. And then the next section is the transfer of undertakings, the TUPEs. This is an update that I provide every quarter. It gives you the latest position on the employers for bonds outstanding or admission agreements outstanding. Of these, there are 4 that give me concern. The first 2, which are the bonds outstanding on page 15, from Aspens and from Caterlink, they do give me concern, because that's a risk that effectively that would then pass back to the City Council and Mowbray Education Trust. And the next 2 on the admission agreements outstanding, both from Beacon Academy to 2 different companies, to Cleantech and Mellors. These may date back to September, so almost a year ago now. And quite frankly, I've managed to get very little from either. We have worked really hard to try and resolve this, or both of them. One of the companies is more willing to work with us, but we have struggled with both of those 2. The others on the list are not such a concern, although the dates are some way back. They are being progressed much more positively, and to be fair, we weren't aware of these until fairly recently, for various reasons. But those other three I have less concern about. So it's the first four. So I know that's a bit of a whiz tour of everything that's happened in the last kind of quarter, and there's quite a lot there. But I hope that's been helpful. But if you've got any questions at all, please feel free.
Thank you, Ian, and it has been helpful, and obviously it is a comprehensive report, and it has got so much information crammed into it, so thank you very much. Going backwards, a couple of comments from me before I go over to the members. Page 15, as per usual, you have the delegated authority to write the stern letters as and when required. And for me, under page 11, item 17, I still can't quite get my head around the Mcleod and Sergeant, not only the impact and the cost implication, but the exit cap and how it all will pan out. And if other members agree, can we at one point maybe have a few minutes after the next meeting, as we always do, to have a little short session on that? I think it's going to be quite hefty in the impact on everybody. So if we have more details, that would be great. Now I shall go over to members for questioning, and it is Councillor Pantling first. But before I do, I forgot to ask, can you all see and hear properly? So yes, everybody can. So first person raised the hand is Elaine. I'm switching off. Over to Elaine. Thank you.
Oh, hello. Thank you, Chair. Just Ian, I wondered if you could the problems that you're having with the situation with Crown Hills and Aspen, what reasons are they giving for that delay?
They're just not progressing it. And I think the problem they're having is because of the issues with COVID. I don't think bond companies are particularly prioritising these sort of areas of work, which I do understand, and I do accept that to a degree, but that still generates a significant risk to the letting employer. But I think it's basically being driven by the bond companies, to be truthful.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. If that answered your question, the next person to speak is Councillor Shepherd, followed by Mrs. Haller. Councillor Shepherd, over to you.
Thank you. Could I just check my understanding of the administration general workload section back on pages 9 and 10? In particular, my understanding of that last column, KPI maximum cases at the end of the period. Now, does that mean that the KPI is that ideally that should be the number of cases dealt with? Could you let me just check my understanding for me, Ian, please?
Yes, certainly, yes. No, that's the number of cases that I wouldn't expect it to exceed. So the remaining cases at the end of the period, the middle column, is the number that I would expect the KPI to be around. So if we look at page 10, let's say June's, Councillor Shepherd, if we look at preserved benefits, we had 772 left at the end of the period. Yes. And I wouldn't expect to have more than 850. So that's on the low side. So I'm comfortable with that one.
Yes.
But then aggregations, the next one, I wouldn't expect to have more than 450 at the end of June. We've got over 1,000.
Yes.
So that's well too high for me.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
Is that okay? So in terms of the numbers, I'm pretty comfortable with them all, apart from the aggregations, Councillor Shepherd.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. So Yeah, I
Sorry.
understand. So
Yeah.
that last column is the number you would not expect to be exceeded.
Correct.
Into the period.
Correct.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you. Yeah,
that's right.
So that-
The other one that is slightly higher is deaths.
yes.
But that's because of COVID. We did have a big spike in deaths, understandably, as did every other fund.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
to be honest, they are moving in the right direction. They're sort of beginning to go back to pre-COVID numbers. But that's just the backlog of cases or cases that are still being worked through, which we haven't finalised yet.
And could I just ask further how you see your way to dealing with the excess in aggregations, which, as you point out, is quite substantial, isn't it?
Sure, it is. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you. After year end, we're going to move the resource that's working on current year end work onto aggregations. And we've also got 3 new staff members joining us from September onwards. And they're going to be trained on some of the other areas to free up those people to also work on aggregations as well.
Right.
Because aggregations is obviously far too high. It shouldn't be at that number. Certainly it shouldn't be. So we've got to push more resource onto it. But also part of the Mcleod remedy appears to be that we're going to have to do aggregations again. So people who have previously been written to and opted not to aggregate, which effectively means keeping benefits separate across different schemes, it appears that certain cases will be given another chance to aggregate as part of the Mcleod remedy. So I can only see that becoming an even greater risk area. So we really need to get on top of those numbers soon. And then we've got the other aggregation work for Mcleod as well, Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And Mrs. Haller next to speak.
Hi. I just wanted to ask about the 95,000, 95k cap. I know that I agree we do need a bit of a extra feedback and details on that, as Rose said. But I just wanted to ask, if we've got people that are questioning or asking for information about that, who should we direct them to? Because through Unison, I've had a couple of people that have seen that and have got worried about it, and I needed to find out really what information we have got to give them, and if they want further details, who they go to. But also, although this might not affect a lot of workers at the moment, if that cap stays on, then in the future, as our salaries increase, a lot of low paid workers, and certainly in places like London and that, even the NHS staff are going to be affected by this right now. So I'm just wondering, what Leicestershire, because I noticed, like in a report that was linked that you sent, a lot of other councils and places questioned this, but Leicestershire wasn't amongst them, and I just wondered why we hadn't raised concerns on that. So 2 questions there, really.
Yeah, sure. The first one, thank you. The first one, the exit cap is an employer issue. It's not really a pension fund issue. So in terms of why Leicestershire didn't reply to the exit cap consultation, I think you really need to ask Leicestershire as the employer, not the pension fund on that, Divya. In terms of the exit cap impact, the reason I've brought it for yourselves is because it includes the pension strain. So that's why there's an impact on the LGPS funds. If it wasn't including pension strain, it wouldn't actually affect the pension section. But because the result of the consultation says it's going to, that's why I'm making you aware. So I'm making you aware in terms of this from a fund perspective and a regulatory fund perspective, because the regulations for the pension scheme will have to change to account for this. But in absolute truth, this really is an impact on the employers, Divya, not the pension funds. Okay. So this is an employer issue, really. But because of the LGPS implications on the strain, we're kind of going to have to work in conjunction with employers much more closely on this. In terms of who people could go to ask information, they really need to ask their employers about it. I would stress it is still only the consultation reply, so nothing has actually changed in statute. So, you know, this isn't yet in, but I can totally understand why people are asking. We're starting to receive questions as well, to be honest. All we're doing at the moment is just literally sending them to the consultation reply. But I know employers are working on this. They're looking at the implications, and I'm sure Leicestershire as an employer will be doing the same, Divya. So I think there will be something that comes out from Leicestershire in terms of communications, or at least an awareness. But it might be something you might be best asking the employer directly about, Divya.
Okay, it's just that I know that even, you know, from my Unison meetings as well, that it's been quite a bit of a concern, because obviously, you know, nationally, it's going to affect a lot of, you know, people that are deemed to be on low paid work, you know, in places like I say, like London and that, and eventually over the years it will affect, you know, the likes of us here. You know, if that cap isn't, you know, set up to actually account for inflation and all of that, that they are my biggest concerns, really.
Yeah, I do take that on board. I think some of the replies to the consultation have actually raised the 95,000 and whether it will be linked to inflation, because that's a very fair point.
Yeah.
Because if it isn't, you're absolutely right. That value will be set, and as you rightly say, as time moves on, the differential will reduce. I think the other thing to mention from a pension fund perspective, if I may just on this, Chair, is because each fund currently in the LGPS can set its own actuarial factors for the calculation of pension strain, which is part of the valuation exercise. I think there's going to have to be some sort of national work across all the four main actuaries in terms of trying to come to a standardized set of strain calculations, because you could argue that why would some strain in one fund be higher or lower than another fund? So again, you've got a differential that probably needs to be considered and worked through. I don't know how that will progress, but it's something that we've raised.
May I just come in there,
I've spoken
please?
to actuary. Yeah.
I think there are some very good questions. Yes, we must appreciate it is only a consultation and it might not go anywhere. But the point is, the salient point is that it needs to be the same all over, as you just said, if it were to be introduced. But just for clarification, how did we get to this point? Just explain how the process works. How did we get there? When the consultation, so Divya has got something to go back on, as into the process as well. And my other point, because there are three more speakers after this, my other point is when we are talking about this, as I suggested, maybe we can, you can weave some information in on that as well. But just explain the process, how it works through, and the time limited, if you know.
Sure, yeah. Thank you, Chair. This consultation actually goes back to April 2019. So it's quite a while ago. So this kind of raised its head. So government introduced this initially as something that they wanted to do to try and reduce effectively the idea was to try and stop people walking away with big payments. That was really the driving force behind it. And they put the consultation out in April last year, and employers replied back then, and then it all went very, very quiet. But now it's raised its head again in terms of how this then becomes statute and how it actually becomes regulation. I'll be honest, I don't know. I'm not entirely sure what timeline government are going to work to on this.
Where in the consultation process are we? Has the consultation finished, or is it still open, and or can members still?
No, the consultation finished, and this is the government's response to those consultations replies that they had back in last year.
Okay, Divya, back to you if you still got anything else.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so originally you said that this is still the consultation period.
No, I said this is the consultation reply from government.
Oh, okay. All right. So so any time now the government could turn around and say, no, this is, you know, statutory, this is what's going to happen. There's no other processes that it's going to go through.
Not that I'm aware of. No, not that I'm aware of. I mean, you could look at the replies and have a read through it yourself. The link is there on point 18, but I'm not aware there will be any further.
Okay, all right. Okay, well, like I say, we'll wait when we get a bit more information in the training bit at the next meeting. That'll be really useful as well. Thank you. Thanks, Ian.
Okay.
Thank
That's
you.
okay, no problem.
Thank you, Ian. And next speaker is Caroline Fairchild. Thank you.
Hello, Chair. As the employer, I'm really pleased, actually, Divya, you've raised the points that you have raised. I'm just currently in the process of checking with a colleague, because my understanding is that Leicestershire did respond to the consultation within the consultation period. So I'm just checking that out. And for many reasons, as you quite rightly raised. In terms of Leicestershire, what we will do at the appropriate time is, once we've established our position, we will then take a report through to our employment committee, which will then set out much more information in terms of our position, and that would also include how we let members of our pension fund know, again, as Ian said, in the position as being the employer.
Thank you very much for that information.
Thanks, Caroline, for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, who's my next speaker? Mrs. Gilbert, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Ian, can I just follow up on Councillor Shepherd's question regarding resources? Obviously, it's good news that you're now going to be getting 3 additional members of staff. But how do you see the training of those staff if your team are continuing to work from home? And also, are there any plans, as you've shown that your team have been successfully maintaining the service during this period, are there any plans for you to continue a sort of a blended approach so that members can have members of your team can have a better work-life balance in terms of some time in the office and some time at home? Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. First point, how are we going to do the training? We've set up some areas that we feel we can train more easily while people are still working from home. Training is problematic, though. Training at home is problematic. We've set up buddy systems, so everybody now has a buddy if they want one, in order for them to carry on progressing. Because this isn't just for new staff as well, Ruth, this is for current staff as well, as we're moving them on to new areas. We're doing a lot of training through Teams, so we can share documents and share screens and go through examples of cases, which we're doing, and that seems to be working quite well. But we do still anticipate that some training will have to take place in the office. So there will be days where we will need people in the office for certain times, where they will need to be alongside colleagues, where they're going to train and learn from them. So it's a blended approach. So we've got kind of 3 sides to it, really. We've got the buddy system, we've got the online training, we've got the face-to-face training when we're able to and allowed to do that. We're also looking at more LGA national training. We've set some of that up, and we've got a few people who have attended some of those online. I'm getting mixed signals back on those, Ruth. Some people have found them easier, some have found them much harder. but I think everybody learns slightly differently. So I don't think there's a perfect scenario that fits everybody on that. But training isn't easy. In terms of the sort of the moving forward approach, I certainly do feel that there will be some element of change in terms of how the pension section works moving forward into the sort of the permanent type position. I cannot honestly see all of us back in County Hall full time. I don't think that will be the case. I don't think that'll ever be the case. I think it'll probably be something like 50-50 or 60-40, home working and office working. We're also looking at people's individual roles and skill sets. Some people's jobs lend themselves more to home working, and other people's lend themselves more to being in the building in County Hall, depending on what type of role they take. So I don't think there's going to be a set answer for everybody either. I think some people might be 80% at home, and I think other people might be 80% at County Hall, depending on the roles. But we are certainly open to all different approaches. But I honestly cannot see us returning back to County Hall full time.
Thank you, Ian. There are no other hands up. Do I assume that concludes all of your questions? Yes. Now, this report was an information report, so it is to note only. And also to note, attached to this report from page 19 to page 24, there is a briefing note on the Mcleod consultations. With that, can members please indicate that they have noted the report? Yes, thank you very much. With that, we now go over to page 25. That's item 6 on your agenda. It runs from page 25 to page 74, and it's the exit credit consultation. Ian Howe again will present this item, and it is over to you again, Ian.
Thank you, Chair. I think it might be easy just to put a bit of context behind this rather than go through the report line by line. Effectively, what happened was in May 2018, the pension regulations changed for how the fund deals with exit credits. Now, exit credits are effectively where an employer leaves the pension scheme. The regulations state we have to do what we call a cessation termination valuation, which is a bit of a wordy exercise, but effectively what it means is we look at the assets and the liabilities of the employer when they leave the scheme, and we work out how much they're expected to be then paying in terms of ongoing future pension benefits, just to see if they've got enough money in the pot, is really it in summary. Now, if an employer previously to earlier than May 2018 leaves, when they're in surplus, that money stays in the pension scheme. That was what it was for, because it's then to pay the ongoing benefits. Then what happened was when the regulations changed in May 2018, they reversed that to effectively say the fund pays that money back to the exiting employer, which created a bit of problems, a few problems for funds, for employers trying to get the money back, thinking that they were going to be entitled to it. We resisted that in the Leicestershire Fund, knowing that there was a likelihood that the regulations would then be changed to reverse the position, which has now happened. So in March, I beg your pardon, in March 2020, the regulations were then changed again to basically reverse the position back to May 2018. But as part of the reversing of those regulations, the fund had to put something into its funding strategy statement. And when you do changes to the funding strategy statement, you have to consult with the employers before you do so, to actually explain how we're going to deal with this moving forward. So that's really what this is about. So in the funding strategy statement, on pages 42 to 44 of the actual document, but I do appreciate they don't align with the actual page numbers in the pack. the page numbers in the packets, it's pages 46 and then it's pages 72 to 74. It's the sections in yellow, the bold sections in yellow effectively are the new parts that show how we're going to deal with exit credits. And this is in consultation live mode with the employers right now. And that runs to August the 31st. In very sort of brief summary, what we're doing is we're suggesting that the money stays in the scheme, which is how it used to be, or it moves back to the outsourcing employer. But if there's clearly demonstrated in the main contract of employment that there's been some sort of cost sharing arrangement, then we'll look at those cases openly and honestly and see if there is indeed any element of that money that needs to go back to the leaving employer. So it's basically just to put the fund in the fairest position and the employers in the fairest position. And that is really what we're trying to do with this consultation. So that's really all I had to say, but I'm obviously happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ian. Now, just to recap, if you're looking at page 46, it's that little bit down here. And then if you're going to page 70, what did we just say,
72 to 74,
yes,
Chair.
72, they're all highlighted there and there in your report. Right, so the point of this and the purpose of this report, it is to take your views to the proposed change to the exit credit policies as set out on those pages we've just mentioned. Now, and all of the recommendation now are made in the minutes. I will have to ask you if you're all happy with that, because as I say, it's your views. And if you have any views, please speak up now, looking for hands, views, questions, and that's Mr. Shepherd first to speak. Over to you.
Thank you. Could I just use my own words to express my understanding, see if I got it right or not through you to Ian? Is this about making sure that the fund has sufficient money in it to pay benefits of retired former employees of an employer who has left the fund? Is that what it really boils down to? That seems to be a very important point. Otherwise, it seems to be fairly obvious that the costs of paying those benefits would unfairly fall on the remaining employees in the fund. Is that the case?
Can I come in there, Chair? Yes, Councillor Shepherd, that's correct. And this is why the Leicestershire Fund has taken the stance that we have, and this is why we've been reluctant to pay any excess credits back, because we thought that was unfair.
Yes.
Because then you ultimately end up potentially having to share any excess cost among the remaining employers in the scheme.
Yes. Well, that's it. If I may come back, then I think it's very important that the fund does hold that line. I think I understood the cost sharing point on a case-by-case basis, but could Ian just perhaps repeat that, please?
Yeah, sure. If in the main contract, so this is outside of the pensions contract, so this is outside of the pensions legal admission agreement. If an outsourcing employer has within its actual main contract with the contractor that they've agreed some sort of pension sharing. So say, for example, they'll pay half and the employer will pay half, and this is part of the negotiation as part of the main contract, then we'll consider that and we'll take that into account. You know, we're not saying that we won't pay any money back to these employers if indeed the main contract says that that's what was intended, but we don't want to just do that without having clear views and sight of the main contracts.
Yes.
In those examples.
Thank you. That was a key word there, I thought. Clear sight. Thank you for that. That's very important.
So,
Thank you.
Ian, if you can just reiterate, these are positive changes in order to protect the payments for everybody. Right.
Correct, Chair. Correct.
So the proposals, so the board has got any more views on these? No hands up. Everybody is happy. So the board accepts the proposed change to the exit credits as set out in the report. Everybody agrees, or is there any dissent? No hands up there, which means that everybody agrees to accept the changes as set out in the report. Thank you very much, and thank you for the explanation, Ian. Thank you. So we now go to item 7. That's a Good Governance Phase 2 Progress Report on page 75. And it goes from page 75 to 96. And I'm afraid it's Ian again. We're making him work for his money today. Ian, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. This was really to provide a bit of an update in terms of where the good governance exercise is at. If you recall, some time ago now, probably maybe a year, even maybe more, maybe 18 months ago, there was a recommendation that that Scheme Advisory Board, I should say, wanted to look at improving the good governance of local government pension schemes. And it made some suggestions following work from Hymans. Hymans were the company that did this work in what they call the Phase 2 report, which is included, to suggest ways that funds could look at improving their governance. And they are listed in the tables on pages 76 and 77 and 78. Now, unfortunately, some of these areas have stalled a little bit I presume because of COVID. I don't actually know for a fact it's COVID, but I think so many things are happening in local government at the moment, and with Mcleod and those sort of areas, I think some of these have taken maybe a slightly lower priority than they originally had anticipated. But because it's gone a little bit quiet, I thought it was worth just bringing this forward to yourselves so you can see where we're at on these items. But I think the key one for me is around the compliance and improvement, which is F1 on page 78, which is each admin authority must undergo an independent governance review, and if applicable, produce the required improvement plan to address any issues identified. We're still awaiting guidance on how that would actually take place. There's been a lot of talk around that in terms of how would it actually happen. So if a fund was to put all these in place, how would somebody actually identify they've actually done it? Is it working? So that's the key one that we're interested in, really, in terms of how would it actually be managed. But this is just really providing you a sort of a position statement on those. And we're effectively now waiting for Phase 3 of the project, which will actually recommend how these will actually be implemented, which is the other key point here. And that part definitely was temporarily halted due to COVID. So this is just simply a position statement, Chair, and obviously I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ian. And as always, it's greatly appreciated that we've got the heads up, and no doubt you will be bringing further information as it develops. And for members, the good governance in the LGPS, the report is attached on your agenda from page 81 to 96. And my first speaker is Councillor Shepherd. Over to you.
I'm sorry, I didn't know my hand was still raised. That's my mistake. I'll take it down.
Okay, take your hand down. So,
thank you.
Are there any questions to Ian on this? Hands up. There are no hands up at all. So for the minutes, we note, and we're looking forward for a further update. Item 8 on our agenda on page 97 to 110 are risk management and internal controls. And again, it is over to Ian, and it is our standard lot with all of the little risk management things on the back for us to go through. Ian, to introduce.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is the Fund Standard Risk Register. I would say we've been really more closely monitoring this than even we would normally do so, and we do keep a close eye on the risks, clearly. Because of COVID, and we've kind of really gone through this again, and we are doing so more and more regularly. So I think that's the first thing I should say. We haven't really made any major significant changes, though, in absolute truth, which has been a good sign. Although we are clearly looking at these all the time. The key 4 points are listed in section 4 on page 97. The first one, we've just expanded it to make it a little bit more explicit about the guaranteed minimum pensions impacting on pensions increase. But in reality, that's not changed the risk. That's just making it a little bit clearer in the actual risk profile. Risk 6, which is the Mcleod risk, which we have talked about already earlier in the report. It's important to expand on this to now include the cost cap. So this, I will just expand on this briefly, if I may, but I think the point you've talked about earlier about at the next meeting we'll have a session on Mcleod and the exit cap. I'm very happy to do that because I think it's very important, and I'll also include the cost cap in that as well, if I may. Just very, very broadly, just again for information, I don't know whether you recall, but the cost cap work was looking at the kind of the cost structure in terms of whether the future cost or the current cost value was going to be exceeded in terms of the current scheme. This was before Mcleod. I must say. And the cost cap had actually breached by more than 2%. 2% is the tolerance. But it had breached on the low side, which actually meant that scheme members' benefits were going to change to actually arguably to improve them. How that improvement was going to happen wasn't clear, but it could have been a change to accrual, or it maybe could have been reduced contributions being paid into the scheme by scheme members. But then because Mcleod then came in and government were obviously concerned that they lost the Mcleod judgment, they paused the cost cap. So the cost cap went on pause. The Mcleod risk has been expanded to now include the cost cap because the cost cap has now been unpaused and will form part of the Mcleod remedy. So I think that's quite important. So those two individual areas have now been effectively clumped together as one. So I'm really closely looking at that. So both in terms of how Mcleod will work, but also the cost implications as well. And then the other two, risk 7, is a new risk, but it's actually a risk that we've been managing for a long time. But because it's on the internal audit plan, we've actually added it back into the risk register, and that's reviewing contribution bandings and contributions being applied correctly. And that's something we do every year. And then risk 8 is a new risk. That's immediate payments if they're not applied correctly. What's happened, and this was really, really unfortunate timing, I have to admit. The pension section always had a plan to take on the payment of immediate payments. That was always the case, and that was part of the new system implementation, which goes back now 2 years. The week it went live was the week COVID hit, and was the week we all moved to home working. So it was kind of a bit of a double whammy for us. So we've added that risk in there just to ensure that that is continually monitored and the processing takes place correctly, just to make sure it's a higher profile so everybody's aware of that. That's really why it's been added. But I am pleased to say there are no risks in the high category. Everything's in a manageable state. So I'm currently pleased with the risk register, but as I say, I am monitoring that very regularly. I'm obviously happy to take any questions.
Right, as this is another report, just to note, are there any more questions? No hands up. Oh, Ruth, over to you.
Ian, can I just ask about risk 5 and the fire service? Because my last recollection was that they were going out to tender for the service. Is that still the case? And have you got any clear timelines Because I know this was having a resourcing impact for your team, and I think you were hoping to move those resources into your main team to support with the additional work through Mcleod, etc.
Yes, certainly, Ruth. Thanks for raising that. Yes, I can give you an update on that. Yeah, I'm now able to say that the tender completed and the 3 fire authorities are moving their pensions administration across to West Yorkshire. We have a very clear and detailed project plan in place, Ruth, and myself and 2 of my colleagues are working very closely to ensure that this transfers over. The first data cut goes across to West Yorkshire later this month, and then the second, hopefully the final one, will take place at the very beginning of December, with the clear intention of this ending with us on the 31st of December. Now, if that all takes place, which I don't anticipate it not taking place, I have every faith that that will work. That will free up 2 people that will move across into the LGPS to help resource. One of them will move into the benefits team to help with taxation and pension payments, and the other one is a team manager, and that team manager will help us in a various number of areas, Ruth. So it will certainly help. It will also help with Mcleod as well. So that will certainly help us. As part of that, I'm looking at the overall pension structure, and I do have a proposal to make to senior managers at the county council in terms of helping us put that into a more solid position to help us deal with Mcleod and also these other challenges that we've got currently ongoing, exit cap, cost cap, and a number of others around the governance. So that's helpful, Ruth. So that's the current position. So I hope that's clear.
Yes, thanks, Ian. Yes, thank you for the update.
Thank you.
Thank you for raising that, Ruth, because I've forgotten all about that as well. Appendix with all of the risk scores starts at page 99. Are there any questions on that? There are none. So we are galloping to the end of this meeting. Any other items which are decided the chairman has decided as urgent? There were none raised, but you know me, I'm asking, do you have anything else you want to ask Ian? Anything else you want to have included in the next agenda? Caroline, over to you.
Yes, it's just I'm now able to confirm that Leicestershire did take part in the consultation on the exit cap process. So the reason for just raising it at this point in the meeting, so it is minuted. So I have now carried out that check. So hopefully, Divya, that will also answer some of your questions as well about our position.
Great, thanks, Caroline.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. That's really valuable to know. So, nothing else? Okay. So, the dates of future meetings, they will be at 10 o'clock in future. And the next meeting is on the 26th of October 2020. And there's a small correction that the 31st May should be the 24th of May meeting. Hang on, but no, sorry, confusion here. The meetings are 26th of October, 8th of February 21, 30th of August 21, and 8th of November 21.
But there's the 24th of May.
Hang on, I have to just confer with Kath. Go on, Kath, over to you.
Sorry, just to confirm on the agenda, there's a slight error that on the 31st of May, because that's actually a bank holiday, so we'll have it on the 24th of May. But I'll send out Teams invites after this meeting, so you will have it in your diary.
Right, we got that all, so that's to be put in the diaries. And I think with that, it concludes our meeting. I thank you all for attending, and especially Ian and his team for, as always, sterling work and for all of your input. And I'm looking forward to seeing you all on the 26th of October. And thank you to our IT team here and Kat. So I would like to say have a safe journey home, but that is irrelevant. Thank you all very much, and I'm signing off. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye.